welcome. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Parks and Recreation Commission for Wednesday, February 26th. We can all rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Chair Clark.
Here.
Vice Chair McGill.
Here.
Commissioner Baker. Here. Commissioner Lesner-Buxton.
Here.
Commissioner Longstreet.
Here.
Commissioner Martinez-Cohen.
Here.
Commissioner Perry.
Here.
Do we have any changes to the agenda? Nope. Written communications. Okay. There's no one here for public comment. We do have a speaker on an agenda item. So we will move on to our Youth Council report. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Quinn Steffen, and I'm the chair of the Santa Barbara Youth Council.
Hello, my name is Davis Flanagan, and I'm the treasurer of the Santa Barbara Youth Council.
First of all, thank you to the Parks and Rec Commission. We are here to update the Commission on what we have been working on with the anti-vaping initiative that we voted to support. We secured our second grant from the Tobacco Prevention Program from the Santa Barbara County Public Health Department. The scope of work for this grant was to create an English and Spanish anti-vaping PSA that included flavored tobacco and the impact on youth, as well as to have an educational youth speak out. We wanted to thank the City Council member, Oscar Gutierrez, as he helped us at TVSB every step of the process.
Alex Chow, a voting youth council member, and Victoria Chow, a non-voting youth council member, spoke at the County Board of Supervisors on December 10th, sharing their personal experiences of the impact of vaping at their schools. In addition, the Youth Council voted and sent a letter of support in banning flavored tobacco to the Board of Supervisors. On March 17th, the ban will go into effect. We are proud of the work we have been doing and to be a part of supporting the health of the youth in this community.
On February 10th, we presented at the Neighborhood Advisory Council on our anti-vaping campaign, and the Youth Leadership Summit is scheduled for April 4th. We are partnering with several youth organizations and have the support of the NAC to have a dynamic educational youth speak out on vaping and the impact on youth health. The community is welcome to join this portion as it will kick off the Youth Leadership Summit. We will then break into youth-centered workshops. We are in the planning process of location and finalizing the details of these workshops. And now we will present our English PSA.
We're in the last stage of this anti-vaping PSA. The Youth Council will receive money for TV spots and digital advertisement after the feedback and if any edits are required from youth focus groups. The state has requirements that must be met in order to receive those funds. The questions have been created to meet the state requirements and have been approved by the evaluator for the Tobacco Prevention Program and will be sent to the local youth groups who have agreed to participate. Again, thank you to the council member Oscar Gutierrez, who has been a helpful and supportive ally throughout this entire process. And thank you guys for hearing us out.
Thank you.
Oh, you guys, thank you so much. That's really impressive work. I had some questions. I had a question. So I just from personal experience and knowing kids about your age, 2 years ago, I felt like the vaping incidences in junior highs and high schools, I felt like there are a lot of kids that did it. Have you seen that number plateau among your friends or acquaintances? Have you seen it go up or stay flat or go down in the last 2 years?
I don't know.
Yes, definitely.
Which one?
Personally, I've seen so many people be affected, especially because a couple years ago I was in junior high, and just moving to high school, just seeing the increase of people doing it is just crazy to be around. So more. Yeah, a lot more.
I think more. Yeah.
And then you said you'll be sending this to local youth groups who are committed to being a part of this. Will this go out to all of the public schools in the area for kids to see?
I think initially we're going to send it out to some local youth groups. I don't remember who it is on the top of my head, but in doing that, we can get feedback from those groups in order to get the funding, in order to send it to media and get different sponsors, to get like the advertisement out, and then we will send it out to more people. First, we just have to, because there's some requirements that need to be met, first we have to get some feedback, and then we can send it out to more people.
My last question is, who did the animation? Is that animation? Is that what you call it? Digital movement?
That's actually some youth council members acting, and then it was council member Oscar Gutierrez who helped us make it more animated and look like that.
Wow, skills.
Yes.
Did anybody else want to say anything?
Yes, I have the pleasure of going to the meetings every 2 weeks, and they are before the referred to present company, the hardest working committee in the city, and I just would say that on record that some days I'm sitting there thinking, God, they work twice as hard as I do at my day job, and they don't get paid. So hats off to you all.
Thank you.
I agree. You guys are incredibly hardworking. And it's so effective because teenagers aren't going to listen to this coming from their parents or other adults. It's so much better that it's coming from you. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on to our Commissioner Committee assignment reports, and I'll start with Commissioner Perry.
Arts and Crafts did meet last week, and I was unable to attend, but I did get a report that they are moving forward with some of their reorganizations.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, the Creeks Commission did meet last week as well, and I was not able to attend. But the main item on the agenda was the fiscal year 2019 Water Quality Research and Monitoring Program Summary, which is online. They are giving the results of the fiscal year 2019, water quality reporting, and that's all online that people can look at.
I attended the Neighborhood Advisory Council where we saw the vaping video, and also discussed the schedule for next year, and the big change is that Mike Wiltshire, who was staffing NAC, has now moved to be the waterfront director. So Matt Four is back taking over the Neighborhood Advisory Council staffing duties. I attended the Sea Level Rise meeting, and we'll be getting our report here in April. And the De La Guerra Revitalization Committee meeting with Commissioner Perry, and we reached consensus regarding some parking issues, and we will be meeting again a couple of months. They've sent it off to do some preliminary design work, so.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Baker?
The Golf Advisory Committee did not hold a regular meeting this month. There were a special meeting I did not attend, and I think there's one tomorrow, which I'm going to try to attend. So.
Thank you. Please.
I attended youth council meeting, and I think the report speaks more than I could say.
And I attended the Park Foundation meeting, which was it's 3 months of financial reviews and an ongoing discussion of possible fundraising events that we could do in various venues across the city.
Street Tree Advisory Committee meeting, and we discussed and visited the trees that are on our agenda today. That commission and staff communications? Nope. Okay. We don't have any ceremonial items. We do have a summary of council actions. Did anybody have questions? Okay, and we have minutes in our packet. Did everyone have a chance to review those? Would you like to make a motion to? Okay. Okay. So moved, and that brings us to our Street Tree Advisory Committee items. Oh, sorry. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Okay.
Good afternoon, Chair Clark and Commissioners. The first Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for review is located at the intersection of Olive Mill Road, Coast Village Road, North Jameson, and the US 101. It is for the proposed roundabout. Given this is a public improvement project, we've asked Laura Yanez, Public Works Engineer with Public Works, to give a brief presentation regarding the project. Okay.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Nathan. Again, I'm Laura Yanez, Supervising Engineer with the Streets Engineering Division of Public Works and Project Manager for the Olive Mill Roundabout project. So the project entails installing a roundabout at the intersection that he described. If any of you have been through the intersection, it's very complicated to navigate. Everyone kind of stops and looks at each other to see who should go because no one really knows who has the right of way, causing queuing. And then also this is a mitigation to the 101 widening project. So this project came about through the AIR process and a requirement of the widening. So with that and the congestion of the intersection, it's a proposed roundabout project that will mitigate the queuing. To add to the complexity, this intersection is bisected by the city and county line. So if you look on the right-hand side, it is Coast Village Road, which is in the city. And then on the other side of that line is Jameson Lane, which is in the county, as well as the on and off ramp to the highway, which are the two legs on the bottom. And then going north is Olive Mill Road, which a small segment of it is in the city, and then it transitions into the county. So currently we're in the preliminary design phase and have been working very closely with Caltrans as well as the county, as all of the decisions have to go through all of the different entities within those agencies as well. Like I said, we're in preliminary design and have gone to ABR for concept review with this landscape plan, given the proposed improvements, which entail roundabout features, some of which are the reason for the tree removals, which we're asking for approval of 5 trees, one being a eucalyptus tree, which is on the parking finger on Coast Village Road, if Nathan can kind of point to. So given that crosswalks have to be separated from where vehicles park and where they back out onto, we are losing a parking spot there in front of 1298 Coast Village Road. This area is in the coastal zone, so in order to mitigate for that parking loss, we're recommending that we remove the parking finger, which is on that leg and has one of the eucalyptus trees. So given the change in geometry on that corner, that is one of the impacts that is affecting the tree. Also, another purpose of the roundabout is to slow vehicles down as they go through the intersection.
I just wanted to briefly interrupt because I know BB and I understand the mitigation for losing the parking spot in the coastal zone, but I'm not sure that everybody on the committee is aware with the requirements.
Yeah, so with the city's local coastal plan, and I don't know it verbatim, but basically we're required to maintain parking in what's considered coastal access zones. So this is considered a coastal access zone requiring any loss of parking to be mitigated, given the really tight corridor that this is. This was found to be an appropriate location for it, and really the only place on the site that we can mitigate within. Thank you for that. And so, as I was saying, one of the purposes of the roundabout is to slow down vehicles as they do go through the intersection, since it's no longer stop controlled, which requires changing in the geometry of each of the corners. And so that's why you see an expanded corner, which we call a curb extension, as well as a median, which allows us to create that curvature that will slow vehicles down to about 20 miles an hour. So existing, there's a median there now. With the proposed design, the median will be reduced in size, which requires the removal of the 4 Washingtonian palm trees, Mexican found palm trees. Previously, and what we show here is the replacement of those trees, but after community outreach and taking this recommendation to the ABR, the Mexican found palm trees are not proposed for replacement, versus it's just a removal, and the removal of those trees will be mitigated along the median along Coast Village Road, and we'll work with Nathan on what those trees, what species it is, based on the designated tree list. And so those are some of the geometric changes that have caused the removal of these trees. Another item that went to the committee was the olive trees, which we're proposing in the center of the roundabout. Those are currently not in the street tree advisory or street tree list. So we requested a designation that they be co-designated in order to be included, since it is along Olive Mill Road, so our landscape architect found that olive trees would be appropriate for this intersection. One of the things that we've had ongoing discussions about is landscape responsibility for maintenance, as well as who will own this intersection, since it's bisected by many agencies, and that's still an ongoing conversation. A lot of the times, Caltrans has owned intersections directly adjacent to an on and off ramp. And so we're still working with them as to who will own the intersection once the project is built. And so that's made the maintenance responsibility discussions a little difficult, as well as into, we don't really know yet who's going to own it, so then the maintenance is something that's also ongoing. We have discussed our proposed plan with the adjacent property owners, since the city's municipal code requires that property owners maintain the parkway areas adjacent to their property. And so they approve of the plan. They generally like the proposed landscaping, and we tried to work with what they have on site and recommend similar species of plants, drought tolerant, that work within the guidelines in terms of sight lines and not really hindering any of our codes or design features. That's it. Yeah, so if you have any questions.
Thank you so much.
No. Were we able to make...
Yeah, so the applicant, as Laura outlined, is requesting the removal of 4 Mexican fan palms from the median on Coast Village Road, as well as a lemon-scented gum eucalyptus that's located in the parking lot finger that she referenced. The committee reviewed all trees, noted that they were all in fair condition, but the project represented a reasonable and practical development, made a motion to approve the removal of the 5 identified trees with the condition that 5 new trees for a 1-to-1 ratio be replanted in appropriate locations along the 1200 block of Coast Village Road, permitting that they're designated species that we'll work with the applicant on.
Correct. All right. Are any more questions?
I do, but I don't need to go first.
Okay, please.
So I just wanted to ask about those Mexican palms. When I was reading page 1 of the memorandum, it says, finding the Mexican fan palms are not appropriate for the area and no longer recommended. So I struggled a little bit with that because it kind of sounds like if this was a private application, the interpretation would be, we kind of don't like them. And so my question is, do they need to be removed for the size of the median? And that's really the fundamental.
Yeah.
They have to be
They have to be
removed because
removed.
they're too big for the median.
Correct. Since
Okay.
right now they're a
Okay.
cluster.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chair Clark and Commissioner McGill, I believe Laura could elaborate on it a little bit if necessary, but I think that during review they determined that it represented a sightline issue as you're entering the roundabout. Thank you.
Clarification, and so you're proposing to replace them with the olive trees, but you need to designate the olive trees before you can replace them with that. Is that correct?
Chair Clark and Commissioner Martinez-Cohen, this particular item is for the review of the 4 Mexican fan palms and the lemon scented gum. We'll have the very next item for review is just a species designation for Olive Mill Road, where they're proposing to co-designate the use of olive on Olive Mill Road. So there's 2 separate items for this roundabout project.
Right? Somewhat.
Well, they're related in that they're the same project, but they're significantly different in terms of these are proposed removals versus just a species designation that allows for the use of olive on Olive Mill Road in the future.
Got it. But some of the trees that you would want to replace with the 1-to-1 ratio are olive trees, are they not?
No, they're the currently designated species, which.
Got it. So the olive would not be an option? Is that? I thought she said that's what you wanted.
Just to clarify, the replacement trees in the 1200 block of Coast Village Road, there's 5 designated species, of which olive is not one. There's like rainbow gum, Monterey cypress, a white ironbark, and 2 varieties of magnolia that are currently designated for the 1200 block of Coast Village Road, which is where we will be using the available planting areas. Correct. So the replacements for the mitigation will occur in the 1200 block of Coast Village Road. The very next item that we'll discuss is for a species designation change or co-designation that is on Olive Mill Road. Thank you.
Chair Clark, if I could just add the quote that Commissioner McGill read was actually the action of the Architectural Board of Review in terms of their findings related to the proposed project. Thank you.
Commissioner Longstreet?
I don't have a question, but I do think this project will be a great benefit to that area. When I drove up there to look at the trees over the weekend, you know, it's going to make it flow so much better, we all hope, and I can support this project.
I would like to make a motion to agree with the Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation that the commission approve the proposed removals on the condition that trees be replaced on a 1-to-1 ratio with one of the currently designated species and that they be planted along the 1200 block of Coast Village Road.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? And so moved.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, the next item for review is the code designation for Olive Mill Road to use olive. There exists a current designation for lemon scented gum eucalyptus on the street, so the applicant's requesting to co-designate the use of olive on Olive Mill Road. The committee reviewed it and made a motion to approve made a recommendation to approve the change.
Question?
No, I would make a motion that we support the recommendation of the Street Tree Advisory Committee to co-designate the olive tree for that location at Olive Mill Road.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So moved.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, the next item for review is located at 1308 East Cota Street. The applicant is requesting the removal of 2 silk trees from the public right-of-way. These are street trees that have been requested for review. The applicant has noted a deterioration in vigor, as well as being subject to utility pruning. The trees are located underneath utility lines and subject to frequent pruning from Southern California Edison subcontractors doing utility vegetation pruning. We reviewed the trees on site. The committee noted that there was more decline in the tree furthest to the east, and that the tree to the west was in better shape overall in terms of its general health. The committee made a motion to approve the removal of the tree furthest to the east and conditioned that a designated species, which is a coast live oak, be planted at 15-gallon size, and then to deny the removal of the tree to the west. Staff, while on site, noted some decay that wasn't present during initial inspection, and we went back out to the site and did some further exploratory work and determined that the decay was extensive enough to warrant removal from city staff. So in reviewing that item, staff made the follow-up determination that this would be a removal that city staff would typically facilitate. So staff will be scheduling this removal at some point in the near future and arranging for a replacement tree to be planted as part of our replacement program, since the tree satisfies removal requirements from the city's perspective. The tree to the west was determined to not satisfy those requirements for removal, so the committee's recommendation to deny the tree to the west still holds.
Commissioner Longstreet.
I have a question. Aren't there 2 oak trees already there, right? Are those volunteers, or were they?
Chair Clark and Commissioner Longstreet, one of the applicants was home the day that we were on site, and they did mention that they were volunteers. There's a holly oak to the west. It's larger than the other one. It's in a very undesirable location. It's tough to see from the photograph, but it's directly behind the water service.
No, I noticed that.
Yeah, so long term, a really, really bad location for the tree. And while it is a quercus, so it is an oak, it's not the designated tree. And there is a little sapling that's germinated on its own. It looks like down close to the utility pole in the photograph to the right. Also was indicated to be a natural sapling from the applicant.
Okay, thank you.
If there's no more questions for Mr. Slack, we do have a speaker. Gregory Baker, welcome. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for having me. Anyway, I'm not taking exception with their findings. It was just, I have a historical perspective. The tree that they're going to take out, what started a lot of this is actually the woodpeckers damaged it so much that limbs fell out. The city had to come out and remove it. I see the same sort of decay and woodpecker damage on the tree down the hill, even though the root rot does not seem as significant. But I've watched these trees in decline for the last couple of years. So a couple of things. We love trees, my wife and I. This is not a matter of like, oh, we hate this. We love oak trees. So we just want to, get this situation mitigated, in a timely fashion and also maybe cost effective. Because I can tell you the limb on the lower tree is going to break off the next time there's enough wind to do it, because it's really got a lot of woodpecker damage to it. So anyway, I'm thrilled that the city's going to do what they're going to do for the eastern tree. I just sort of thought that maybe by removing both of them and then putting in an appropriate oak tree would give the oak a chance to get going. We're going to watch the other tree decline just like the existing one that's going to be taken out. So I just thought it'd be expedient. Anyway, no argument with your efforts, just wanted to add a historical perspective about the damage and the fact that the tree is dropping limbs. And it's in the overhead lines too, so that's sort of a concern too. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Commissioner Longstreet?
So I look at kind of where that placement is with the water meter. So you have an adequate, if the eastern tree comes out and you plant the coast live oak, those take a while to achieve any size at all, don't they? I assume while the crew is out there, they would do a little manicuring of the other and assessing for woodpecker damage and those kinds of things. But my feeling is that if we're kind of stepping through this a little more slowly, we don't denude an area of the trees. Give that coast live oak a few years, maybe this tree will last and provide the neighborhood with, and the birds, those woodpeckers do need a place to peck. That then, we know that tree has a lifespan and it is going to come out eventually, but we haven't denuded the neighborhood in such a way, that one little coast live oak hasn't had a chance to gain any substance. So that's sort of my thought, and I don't know, you were at Street Tree Advisory Committee, if that's sort of the thought that passed through there.
I'm not so sure it was stated in those specific terms, but when I was thinking about the trees, I also was thinking about diversity. And when we're looking at the diversity of our urban forest, it's not just a diversity of species, it's a diversity of ages. To maintain a healthy population of anything, you have to have diverse ages, because something will kill all the young ones or something will kill all the old ones. That's what I was thinking about. I think they just thought that the tree was not sick enough to remove yet. They wanted to maintain part of the urban forest while they were waiting. So yeah, same thoughts. Vice Chair McGill?
Just a question for Mr. Slack. So when there is a situation like this where we know one tree has declined enough to warrant removal, and there's kind of warning flags going up about the next one, bearing in mind the previous two comments, does that, for the city, does that then put the tree on more of a watching brief so that can be more proactively managed?
Chair Clark and Commissioner McGill, that is correct. We will have to pay closer attention, which we often do when we are aware of just general decline in any street tree. And I thank Mr. Baker for mentioning that specific limb on the tree. When we were on site, just to provide some clarification, that limb will be removed due to some decay. The remaining portion of the tree will be pruned and retained. But certainly there is a need for a higher level of due diligence in terms of monitoring when we're aware of decline in the species.
And Mr. Baker would be able to call you and say, please come inspect the tree again, and you would go out and look at it if you felt there was a different threat or...
Chair Clark and Commissioners, yeah, that's fantastic. We often have that conversation with people. Part of our success relies heavily upon the interaction with the homeowners. They see the trees routinely. We don't see them nearly as often, and they can be acutely aware of changes. So that's often part of the dialogue with homeowners in any conversation we have with them pertaining to street trees.
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Perry.
We've covered the fact that live oaks are slow growing. How did the Street Tree Advisory Committee come to the conclusion that do one now and one later when you won't have the uniform growth?
Chair Clark and Commissioner Perry, I think when the committee looks at these things, and Chair Clark touched on this quite well, if a tree doesn't really satisfy those requirements for removal, oftentimes the recommendation to remove just simply gets deferred. So I think it's more in terms of seeing the value in the existing tree and less about the uniformity of maybe 2 new oak trees as opposed to 1 oak tree and 1 existing silk tree. If they felt that there was a need to support the removal of the existing silk tree, they would have, but there's still, quite a bit of life left in it and not any real rational need to remove it at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Slack. Any more questions? Okay.
Well, then I would move that we concur with the Street Tree Advisory Committee to deny the removal of the western silk tree, and that the eastern silk tree will be removed by the city and replaced with a coast live oak, and the western tree will be trimmed and maintained at that point.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. And thank you.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, the next Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for review is a property located at 216 Santa Rosa Place. The tree that is being requested for removal is commonly referred to as a kurrajong. Some people know them as bottle trees. And this is a street tree that is being requested for removal. The applicant listed several reasons, predominantly the main one being a general decline in vigor, noting, I think they bought the house in the early 80s, and they stated that there's been really poor performance the entire time that they've lived in the property. They've also noted sidewalk disruption and private sewer lateral issues as reasons for removal. Did want to follow up and advise the commission that the streets department has been notified of the sidewalk disturbance so that they could go out and inspect and log the existing sidewalk displacement. The committee reviewed the tree, felt that it was in fair condition and didn't satisfy any requirements for removal at this present time, and made a motion to deny the removal of the kurrajong at 216 Santa Rosa Place.
Are there any questions?
I don't know if it's a question or a comment, but we do have a letter from the applicant basically saying they're out of town or they would have been here, and then effectively reiterating the reasons for their application. I just wonder, is there any reason why we shouldn't just wait for them to come back so that they can come in and speak to us if they want to? Assuming they would be here.
I mean, I think we can speak for them here by looking at their letter. They're out of town 6 months of the year. I had the same thoughts, but they're pretty much saying if they care a lot, they put a lot of work into this, and
Yes.
we can talk about each of their points so that we're here to represent them as well as the city, so we can discuss this here, unless.
Yeah, we can, and I obviously will defer to the majority. It's just if they would really want to speak to us, do we lose much by giving them that opportunity? That's really my only question.
No.
Yeah.
But they're gone 6.5 months of the year. That was my.
I didn't realize it was 6.5 months.
They said June Lake. Oh, they live half the year in June Lake. So.
Yeah.
But that's a very good point. I mean, they deserve to have a voice. So if whatever we can do to facilitate that. So I guess one of their major concerns. Does anyone have any more questions before we go over their letter for Mr. Slack?
I noticed there was a development sign in front of the building when I went by. Is there a development happening that impacts this?
Chair Clark
It
and
wasn't mentioned.
Chair Clark and Commissioner Longstreet, the applicant is in the process of developing an accessory dwelling unit. That the development of the accessory dwelling unit does not have any impact on the street tree.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, I have one clarification. It's about the pardon me, about the designated street tree of the street. They're saying they want to replace it with the currently designated street tree, but then you said that that tree is the designated street tree. No, what, can you clarify, please?
Yes, Chair Clark and Commissioner Martinez-Cohen. The designated street tree species for this specific section of Santa Rosa Place is the New Zealand Christmas tree. So they're making a point in referencing the fact that the species that's planted in the parkway is not the designated species. That is not terribly uncommon on several streets in town where in many cases the trees were planted prior to the designation even being developed.
Got it. Thank you.
Mr. Slack, I think one of their big concerns was the financial costs incurred in replacing sewer lines. They've paid $7,000 in 2011 to get that done. And they mentioned the fact that the species is the roots are water seeking. So will the roots again seek water, or is this a case where it was like that orange, I remember that this house was built at a time when they used that orange paper type of plumbing and the sewer lines were really susceptible to water seeking roots. I'm assuming if they had replaced the sewer line in 2011, the materials might be a little bit more resistant, but that's just an assumption. Could you?
Chair Clark and Commissioners, in all cases, there exists a previous failure in a sewer lateral prior to root entry. It's well documented and well understood. It's supported by case law, and the city's policy for quite some time has been that there's a previous failure in the line. Old construction materials weren't designed to last the decades that they've actually lasted, and previous construction methods where you simply had a pipe sitting inside of a pipe already was leaking, and it creates areas of high oxygen and water content, and if fibrous roots are in that area, they will proliferate and take advantage of that resource. But it's generally understood that there's a previous failure that allows root entry prior to those issues. And in most cases, depending on the extensiveness of the sewer lateral repair, if it's a thorough repair from, say, the house connection all the way to the Y where it connects to the city's main line, the probability of additional root infiltration is very, very low, if not zero, depending on the repair methods used to repair the sewer lateral.
Okay, and then, so the probability of re-infiltration is low depending on materials. I'm guessing from that price, they did the inline deployment. If that was the case, is that just as sturdy as the regular open trenching sewer replacement?
Chair Clark and Commissioners, at that price point, it's likely that they did a significant repair. It's tough to say without looking at building permits, the full extent. It's common these days for homeowners to use the technique known as slip lining, where they do run a continuous pipe from the house all the way into the main line, which produces a line that has no joints, so there's no point where the tree roots can then enter the line again. There are other methods of repair, but this is the least invasive. Other methods involve having to go digging into the street, which gets extremely costly when you have to pull a permit to do that. So that's likely what they have done, but I'm not sure exactly what they've used.
And I would say this was in 2011. 9 years ago, $6,000 would have been an appropriate price for this.
For the inline, correct.
For any of it.
That's how much.
Even they said they have it in a Y in the street, so they opened the street, and that was done by city crews. So,
Okay. So the likelihood of re-infiltration is low, is my takeaway point, I think.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, yeah, the probability of additional sewer-related issues is very, very low.
Okay. And just to be fair to them, since they're not able to be here, their other concern was the lifted sidewalk. How often is Public Works able to check that sidewalk to see if it's become a dangerous threat?
Chair Clark and Commissioners, as I noted, we did forward the request on for the displacement. They then inspect and then place the inspection results in a queue, and they're making the determinations based on the level of severity. We participate with them frequently in root pruning operations, but we're not really in the loop in terms of scheduling. So it's tough to say how high up on the queue this one places in regards to the context of the whole city. But at some point, it will get repaired as part of the sidewalk replacement program through Public Works.
After it's repaired, based on your experience, how long would a repair like that last in the presence of a tree of this size?
Chair Clark and Commissioners, given the age of the tree, we wouldn't expect to see lots of additional secondary growth or like increases in diameter of the root system, especially the primary root system, which is close to the sidewalk. So if the tree can be retained during sidewalk replacement, the probability of expecting a disruption in the short term is very low, if at all, in the future.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Perry?
Is this the last remaining street tree designation from the original?
Chair Clark and Commissioner Perry, there exist a few of these species left on this specific block of Santa Rosa. I'm unaware of the actual number that exists on the street segment.
Have the others been replaced due to disease or dying off, or is there any justification for?
I would have to look at the work history of the existing sites. It's tough to say without going back and looking at records. I think what we have to do in this situation is just look at the fact that the tree's in fair health and that the committee determined that it didn't satisfy any removal requirements at this time.
Yeah, they mentioned there's 5 other trees like that on their street in the letter, for what it's worth.
Well, I would make a motion to concur with the Street Tree Advisory Committee to deny the removal at 436 Foxen Drive. The wrong one. At Santa Rosa on 216 Santa Rosa.
So we have a second. For discussion, I would just like to check in with Commissioner McGill and make sure she feels like the applicants have been represented.
Yes, I would have personally would have preferred that we wait for them, given that there's no urgency. But I think if we did wait for them at this point, we'd had the discussion. So they wouldn't actually get the richness of hearing our questions and hearing the discussion. So I think we've kind of crossed the bridge. Thanks.
With that, I would like to put it to a vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So moved. Just a reminder, I think I didn't read this at the beginning. Any decisions made by this commission are appealable to City Council within 10 working days.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, the next Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for review is located at 436 Foxen Drive. This also is a street tree. It is a Guadalupe palm. The applicant is requesting removal of the Guadalupe palm, primarily due to debris generation of the palm, citing hazardous conditions with the palm, fronds, fruit, and petiole bases detaching and falling from the palm tree. It also was noted that it's not consistent with the street plantings and not the designated species for the street. Those were also noted on the application. The committee reviewed the tree on site, reviewed the application, noted that the palm is a very rare and quite exceptional specimen of Guadalupe palm for the entire city of Santa Barbara. It's pretty spectacular, and made a motion to deny the removal of the Guadalupe palm at 436 Foxen Drive.
Do we have questions?
Just one quick one. Since it's did you say is it setback, right? Or is it a street? I'm sorry.
Chair Clark.
It's a street.
Yeah.
Okay. The skirting of the tree, how often is that something that should be happening? And is that the city that does that or the homeowner?
Chair Clark and Commissioner McGill, it is a city street tree, so city staff are responsible for the maintenance of the palm. Maintenance frequency with palms in residential areas is a little tricky. We have to kind of change our operation around to visit these, so we don't visit it more than at most a few years. I'm unfamiliar with the last recorded work event. It wouldn't be uncommon in a perfect world scenario to visit a palm like this yearly. It's certainly something that can be done, but it would require the applicant to get a permit from our office to increase the frequency at which the palm is pruned. When you obtain a permit from our office to trim a street tree, the permit itself is no fee, but the work performed is at the expense of the property owner.
And if it was to be at city expense, it would be every X years, whatever X might be.
Chair Clark and Commissioner McGill, that is correct. It's often that residential palms, when they're relatively isolated, are pruned no more than every 2 or 3 years.
Are the property owners able to submit a request for maintenance? Is that a thing?
Chair Clark and Commissioner Martinez-Cohen, any property owner that has an adjacent street tree can contact our office. We perform an inspection, and if deemed necessary, we will schedule the tree to be pruned. Those things can take quite a while. It's work that we work in as best we can, but if we deem that work is necessary, then absolutely.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, just as a follow-up, and you will recall every time we bring our department's budget forward to you, that the funding that we have to maintain our street trees basically works out to $3 a tree a year. So the challenge we face is how to most effectively use our resources to trim trees. That being said, we and the Commission was actively involved in the development of our Urban Forest Management Plan, which was adopted by City Council in 2014. And in that plan, we call for identifying ways to increase resources and funding available to maintain city street trees and also city park trees, because we have even less money to maintain our park trees. I think it's probably like 90 cents a tree or maybe less than that. Yet the city greatly values trees and the urban forest. So when we talk about our budget, when we come back to you in April, we've done some more work on opportunities to implement aspects of the Urban Forest Management Plan, and we'll present ideas for the Commission to consider, and hopefully we'll find ways to work on them and advance some of our tree maintenance objectives, and then also tree planting objectives. So we've also been working on that as well, and so we'll have more information for you in April to discuss how we might move forward with ways to propose increased levels of service as well as increased tree planting opportunities.
No, just ready to make a motion if we're ready.
So since trees increase groundwater infiltration and decrease runoff that contribute to healthy creek ecosystems, does the Creeks Department ever fund tree maintenance in watershed areas?
Chair Clark and Commissioners, currently the majority of the funding that we use to trim street trees come from utility users tax, because these trees are in the street right of way. They aren't park trees. We did work with Public Works this year to plant trees on San Andres using some Measure C funds. And one of the proposals looking forward is how do we enhance our treescape, city street treescape, while we're also looking at, as a city, of how to improve our sidewalks and roadways. So that is certainly one way that we can approach this type of perspective. But then there are other programmatic options that are longer term. Everything's long term when it comes to a tree, as we know, that would look at ways in which to increase funding and or leverage resources in a variety of different methods. And we're actively working with the Public Works Department to identify options.
Great, thanks.
I will make a motion that...
Oh, yes. Apologies, I'm holding it so I don't forget, but we do have a speaker on this item, Mr. Tim Reinauer. Welcome, thank you for coming.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thanks for your time and consideration. So I'm Tim Reinauer, the owner of the property, and just wanted to request your support in this issue. It's a tree that's been problematic for over many years. I've on the property coming up on about 6 years, I don't believe it's ever been pruned by the city. Maybe once, a few palm fronds. To give you perspective, on this picture, it's a little hard to tell, but we've had 20, 30 palm fronds fall at one time. Right now, up here, there's probably 80 or so. That's just from an eyeball looking, at various sections, and it's quite extensive, actually. The placement is what it is, right? But it's within inches of the mailbox and within feet of the other city tree there. But my main concern really is safety and liability. I had people visit the house. Matter of fact, I had someone come last week who happens to know landscaping and trees well, and he spotted the tree, looked up, and almost ran to his car to move it because he said, "I'm not parking underneath that thing." And this is one of the rare streets where there's no sidewalks, right? So whatever falls on the road. It's prevented mail delivery and so forth. So in order to have this tree maintained, on a regular basis would be quite expensive. Something that I can't afford to do on a regular basis. So my position is, let's take a long-term perspective and remove the tree to, based on cost and liability and safety. If there's an option to transplant it somewhere, that could be an option too. I know according to the advisory committee, there's a number of Guadalupe palms at the courthouse. So that would be expensive, but perhaps that's an option. So anyway, those are some of my concerns, and happy to answer any questions and appreciate your time and perspective on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for the applicant before he? No? Okay. Do we have discussion? Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. So, just Mr. Ryan, did I say that? Reinar?
Reinar.
So it is. I'm sorry. So this is it's a street tree, so it's not a setback tree, but there's findings that we make that come from the municipal code when we're looking to remove a setback tree. And we don't have to make those findings to remove a street tree, but we kind of use them as a guide because there has to be some consistency in what we're doing. It has to be a little bit objective. It can't just be subjective. And we really value the rights of property owners. But when I was looking at this tree and reviewing your application, I do understand it's messy and it's inconvenient. And people don't like to park there, and maintenance is a hassle, but I couldn't find any of the findings for removal. It doesn't really serve the principles of good forest management, and the character of the neighborhood would be materially affected. The safety of persons or property doesn't really dictate the removal. So I just wanted to let you know, I know we don't normally call people back, but I wanted to let you know where we're coming from because you're acting in very good faith. And so thank you. That's where I'm coming from. But,
Okay.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Anybody else? So thank you. Sorry, you had to come back up.
No, it's quite all right.
Okay.
It's quite all right, yeah.
Okay, so.
Yeah, I think my position is if, I feel like I'm forced to maintain this tree since the city hasn't been maintaining it. So I'm stuck in a difficult situation that I don't want to be in, you know what I mean? And it'd be unfortunate to take down a tree, of course, right? But it's a tricky situation, I think. And so that's hence my request. And since there's no sidewalks and people walk frequently past this tree, it's an issue, right?
Okay.
Especially for my children playing around on the street and that sort of thing.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Question before you sit? Yes. You've been there for 6 years?
It's been about 6 years, yes.
And the tree has not been trimmed in those 6 years?
I believe that is correct. I've never seen it pruned. There was once where I think maybe a few palm fronds were, maybe they fell off,
Yeah.
but it doesn't seem like, I've never seen anyone out there, and I think I definitely would have noticed if it was significantly
When
pruned.
they scalp them pretty hard.
Yeah, I would have noticed that.
That seems excessive, the time between trimmings. Could you concur with that? Do you think it has been 6 years?
Chair Clark and Commissioner Perry, I would be reluctant to say without looking at the work history. Certainly, we were on site during the day of the visit, and I would say it's it's certainly due for pruning. So I think if the commission makes a motion to deny the removal, it's certainly due for maintenance, and that's something that I'd be more than pleased to work with Mr. Reinauer on setting up and scheduling.
Yeah,
Thank
my
you, Mr.
comment
Reiner.
to you would just be to encourage you to call the city and bug them and get them to maintain it. Especially if you have that many palm fronds stacking up. I saw the picture of your daughter, I think it is, in front of there. I've called and asked, you know, like after a big wind event or whatever, there's always palm fronds everywhere, all over. And you can call and let them know that, you know, there's a pile over here.
Yeah.
They might not come right away, but they usually do come and get them.
Yeah, I did do that in this event, actually. Yeah.
So I would just encourage you maybe to be annoying. And the squeaky wheel gets the oil or whatever the phrase is, and to get that maintenance happening more regularly.
Right, but if that should be happening, you know, every 2 years or so, you know, it doesn't seem like that's going to be realistic, right?
Okay, thank you.
But, yeah.
We have to stick to the agenda, so thank you for your
Thanks.
comments. Discussion? Questions? Motion?
I'll make a motion, but I guess I will preface it that it's relevant to me that this is a rare species. I've brought a palm, and it's also relevant to me that I've learned about the growth patterns of palm trees, and I know that they don't tend, even though it's very close to the mailbox and things, they don't tend to disrupt, from what I've been told from when I brought my own tree to the committee, they don't tend to disrupt foundations and mailboxes and sidewalks and things like other trees do. Palm fronds on city streets is just kind of a Santa Barbara thing. I mean, I live in a neighborhood where this happens a lot, and it tends to be something where either residents or the city makes a big pile, and then the pile gets picked up over the course of a couple of days after a big wind event. And I would encourage, again, like Commissioner Martinez-Cohen, to make a phone call after if they build up and there's an issue. With that, there's my thinking and rationale. I will make a motion to support the commission recommendation to deny the removal of the Guadalupe palm, and pursuant to SPMC MC 1521-1-2, there's no, it's not warranted in a removal. That was very inarticulate, but I think you understand.
Okay.
Thanks.
Discussion? Okay, my final discussion, it's one sentence, is that trees are messy and they're inconvenient, but we can't live in a world without them. So, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
So moved. And again, any decision by this commission is appealable to the city council within 10 days.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, the next Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for review is located at 1171 Crestline Drive. The request is to remove 2 maton trees from the front setback. The applicant has stated a general decline in the 2 maton trees that are located within the front setback. The committee reviewed the application, reviewed the trees on site, and made a motion to support the removal of the 2 maton trees. I do want to make a mention that during the January 22nd Parks and Recreation Commission meeting, the applicant at 1171 Crestline also requested the removal of a weeping fig tree. And during that review, there was a motion to approve the removal of the tree with the condition that a new tree planted within the front setback that could achieve a mature height of 25 feet be planted. While we were on site, initially the applicant started to express an interest in also the maton trees and a desire to replace that tree, or those 2 trees, I'm sorry. And the committee felt that the condition replacement tree would be really successful in this location. It's a very large open area with lots of available rooting volume, so there was no conditional replacement for the motion to support the removal of the 2 maton trees.
Just to clarify, this is the second application at this same residence, and we did approve the other one already with the condition to replace the tree. And that's why this one does not have the condition, because that one tree would probably be large enough to replace all 3 that are now potentially, if we approve these 2. Is that correct?
Chair Clark and Commissioner Martinez-Cohen, that is correct. The applicant expressed a strong desire to replant with the jacaranda, which has a really, over time, can be a very large, mature tree. So putting it in this area would easily fill in over time the area where the 2 maton trees and the weeping fig, which you can kind of reference in the back left-hand photograph there. So the committee felt that this was appropriate.
Thank you.
It's one replacement tree. Not for this one, but for the previous one. The letter's just a little confusing. Just one, right?
Chair Clark and Commissioners, yeah, I'm sorry, it's a very confusing item. So in this case, the applicant's requesting the removal of the 2 maton trees, and the committee has made a recommendation to support the removal of the 2 maton trees. I just referenced the previous condition because it's very customary that oftentimes setback trees are conditioned for a replacement. I did also want to make mention that during this review, the committee felt the commission could make the finding that principles of good forest management will be best served by the proposed removals, and that the character of the immediate neighborhood with respect to forestation will not be materially affected by the proposed removals.
Okay. And a weeping fig is the same as a ficus, because you said weeping fig and the letter says ficus from January.
Ficus is a genus. Weeping fig is a common name.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, I would make a motion to concur with the Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation to approve the removals of the 2 maton trees at 1171 Crestline Drive on the principles of good forest management, and that the neighborhood would not be materially affected.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, the next Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for review is 2 properties located at 3445 and 3449 Richland Drive. The applicant is requesting to remove 4 junipers that are located within the front setback of the 2 properties. The applicant noted general decline throughout the existing junipers. 1 juniper has much more pronounced decline, but there is signs of subtle decline throughout the 4 junipers, as well as concerns with placement close to the building. Likely the plants were probably planted as small shrubs and over time allowed to mature into really large junipers. The committee reviewed the application, reviewed the trees on site, and made a motion to approve the removals within the setback with a condition that the concrete in the parkway be removed and 2 designated street trees be planted in the parkway in front of 3445 Richland Drive. It is worth mentioning that on the application, the applicant did express no desire to replace the trees in the front setback, and the committee made the recommendation to plant the street trees in lieu of required setback planting, since the applicant expressed the desire to not plant trees back in the front setback.
Question. Regardless of the decision or the tree removals or replacements, wouldn't the concrete have to be removed from the parkway anyway? Is it? I thought people weren't allowed to pour concrete.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, that is correct. Technically, the municipal code is quite explicit in that impermeable materials of any kind cannot be used in the parkway. It's not uncommon to find that throughout town, but when we do encounter it, we would have to take action on it in this instance and require the removal of the concrete.
Okay.
Just to clarify, so really what you're saying is that effectively anybody bringing forward a permit for a tree removal, if there was concrete in their parkway, part of the condition would likely be removal of that concrete?
Chair Clark and Commissioner McGill, that is correct.
And, sorry, just to clarify the definition of what a parkway is, you're talking about the slab of concrete, that's right, most adjacent to the curb?
Chair Clark and Commissioner Martinez-Cohen, yes, when we refer to parkway, typically it's the space between the curb and the sidewalk.
Got it.
In some instances, like in the San Roque neighborhood, parkway can actually be the 6 foot space behind the curb where there doesn't exist a sidewalk. That's very confusing, but we still consider it parkway because it's part of the public right of way, and we have the ability to plant street trees in that location.
Got it, thank you.
I need to recuse myself as I live on this block.
Thank you. We do. Are there any more questions of Mr. Slack? Okay. Before the public speaker, I would just like to say that could we, if we end up making a motion for this, can we not put we don't need to remove the concrete parkway because that's going to happen anyway, right? It doesn't need to be part of we could just request that 2 replacement trees be planted.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, it was part of the condition, and if approved, it would be part of the permit. If the commission goes in a different direction, what would then happen is it would be an active enforcement case where we would reach out to the property owner and require the concrete to be removed. So I think it's satisfactory that it's conditional, that the removal of the hardscape in the parkway is conditional upon approval of the setback trees in this specific instance. If the commission goes in a different direction, then yes, we will reach out to the property owner and request that the concrete be removed.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to invite Mr. Richard Mason from Kitson to come speak on behalf of the property owner.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Nathan. Thank you guys for taking the time to hear me today. I appreciate the consideration for removal of the trees, and the property owner does as well. They did express concerns that they would not like to remove the parkway strip and plant 2 city street trees per the conditions. They would actually like to plant some other trees in the front, planter beds there in their front yards of 3445 and 3449. There's 4 independent planter beds. They would prefer, if the mitigation is required, to replace the trees to replace them within the setback on their own property rather than within the street tree median strip.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Mason, isn't it? Yes. With the discussion that regardless of what happens, there would be an enforcement action on the concrete parkway, would that change that opinion?
I did discuss that with ownership of the property, and they would still prefer to plant trees within the front setback rather than planting within the median strip, a city street tree per the designated street tree that's on that street.
Did they say why?
Their concerns were mainly maintenance of the trees. They wanted to be able to maintain the trees per their schedule rather than the schedule of the city. And then also establishment of the tree, watering it, and that they wanted to have better control of that.
Okay, thank you.
Question? Can't tell from the pictures, and I wasn't able to...
Is this a question for the speaker?
Actually, speaker or... can't tell by the pictures, and I was not able to visit the site. Is the cement consistent only with the building in question, or is it for the block of the street? Because it looks from the pictures here that it is just the sidewalk and not necessarily a parkway.
Chair Clark and Commissioner Perry, in this specific instance, it's just in front of the property at 3445, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not terribly familiar if it's continuous throughout 3449 or not. Perhaps Mr. Mason could explain that. And it varies throughout neighborhoods. You know, this is something that's happened over the years, and but I'm not certain exactly how many parkways have impermeable material in them in the specific block of Richland Drive.
Yeah, there are other properties within that block that have cement covering the parkway strip. In front of 3445 is where the parkway strip has been cemented in at some point. The concrete's consistent with the sidewalk and also with the parkway strip, so it's been cemented like that for a long, long time. There's quite a bit of weathering on the sidewalk there and on the parkway strip, so it's been like that for years.
The reason for the question is there are neighborhoods that do not allow for a park strip, they just do a sidewalk, and I'm just not sure if that fits this neighborhood or not.
Chair Clark and Commissioner Perry, no, this is an area where if you were to walk around the neighborhood, there's a pretty consistent parkway and or tree wells throughout. So this is a situation where the parkways, if you were able to be on site, the parkway's clearly visible, and you can tell that the parkway's been concreted in.
Vice Chair McGill?
Mr. Slack, did the committee discuss at all setback trees versus street trees? And if so, what was the reason for requesting street trees versus setback trees?
Chair Clark and Commissioner McGill, there was extensive discussion in regards to both forms of mitigation. As I noted, the applicant initially had expressed an interest in not planting trees back in those small front setbacks, and trying to be semi-cognizant of that, the committee came up with an alternative recommendation. But it was initially discussed that setback trees would make a lot of sense. And there is certainly space for an appropriately selected setback tree to be planted in front of the buildings where the existing junipers are. Again, I think that the committee was trying to be cognizant of the applicant's desire and still come up with a solution for mitigation.
And the reason I'm asking the question, other than, aside from the fact that it might be more of a win-win for the landowner or the property owner, recognizing they still have to remove the concrete, but that's also a win potentially for the city in having a private property owner maintain trees and alleviate that $3 a tree budget a little bit.
Chair Clark and Commissioner McGill, I think that both from staff's perspective and also the committee's, if there was an alternative motion to require setback trees to be planted, that would be more than satisfactory.
I have a question.
Commissioner Longstreet.
I have no problem removing the junipers. They're not attractive. And it's really about the placement of these other trees. Would it be appropriate to make a motion to remove the junipers and then refer it back to the Street Tree Advisory Committee for the placement of to revisit the tree placement? Is that?
Chair Clark and Commissioner Longstreet, I think we would need to, condition the approval for removals so that there was a formal condition that could be enforced through the permitting process. Perhaps Ms. Zachary can clarify.
And my concern is that these parkways are very narrow, and I want to make sure that we get the best tree we can get, the best growth in the tree, and all of that.
Well, if you're talking in terms of street tree replacement, the designated street tree is weeping bottlebrush, which is found throughout the neighborhood, and has performed quite well. And it's not necessarily a small tree, but it is somewhat slow growing and has behaved pretty well given the narrowness of the parkways in that specific neighborhood. So in terms of the street trees, the currently designated street tree is more than appropriate.
Yeah, thank you.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, if I could just jump in. If you would like further consideration by the Street Tree Advisory Committee, you may want to consider just referring the item entirely back to them with the request that they review the applicant's suggestion to plant trees on the property as setback trees rather than street trees. And separately, as staff, we can look in more detail at the parkway issue, depending on that outcome. So if you wanted to do that, that might be a solution to get more information before a decision's made.
Yeah, the other option would be just to amend our recommendation right now to make it a setback instead of a street tree. Is that correct? Those are the two options.
I think what Jill is saying is, since STAC was trying to be cognizant of the property owners having to take care of it, they made a decision based on what they thought the property owner wanted instead of knowing what they really did want. So it would be nice to go back and let them go back with knowledge of what the property owner desired and see whether or not it was feasible to plant setback trees. I'm not sure they fully explored.
I think Mr. Slack just said that it would probably be appropriate as well to do that. I was just thinking of being expedient and a little bit more efficient. Instead of sending it back, we could probably just make that amendment here because it seems to be pretty reasonable based on what he said, and based on what this gentleman is also saying. But I'm either way.
So is it possible to make a motion that says they plant either setback trees or street trees at their choice?
Sure.
I would say, I'd make a motion that we send this back to the Street Tree Advisory Committee to revisit the item at 3445 and 3449 Richland Drive, revisit the placement of the trees, and meet with the property stack, have this information that brought to us tonight.
Would we say denying without prejudice? Is that what this is called? Or just send back defer? Okay, I'll second that. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So moved.
Thank you.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, the next Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for review is located at 1212 Punta Gorda Street. The applicant's requesting the removal of 3 trees from the front setback. One is a common horse chestnut, one is a weeping fig, and the other is a floss silk tree. On the application, the applicant noted that he's going through extensive renovations on site through the mobile home, and he's having accessibility issues given the existing horse chestnut tree. The weeping fig, while in great health, is causing disruption both to his private fence, and it's starting to displace the public sidewalk, not to the level that would rise of warranting repairs at this point, but it's only a matter of time until continued growth could cause long-term disruption of both the fence and the sidewalk. And then it's kind of difficult to see, but the floss silk tree is behind the weeping fig tree, not really causing any damage right now, and it is in fair health. The applicant expressed an interest in trying to move away from having large trees on the property and move towards a low-maintenance landscape, in addition, again, to the accessibility issues with the horse chestnut being the primary driving factor. The committee reviewed the application and reviewed the trees on site. During review, there was extensive decay noted in the horse chestnut tree that was evidenced through on-site inspections. The weeping fig, as noted, was causing disruption to both public and private property, and the committee felt that the floss silk tree was not causing any issues to the site in its current state. Upon further review, the committee made a recommendation to approve the removal of the common horse chestnut and the weeping fig, and to deny the removal of the floss silk tree, with the condition that a 15-gallon coast live oak be planted in the parkway in front of the property at 1212 Punta Gorda, which is the current designated species. During this motion, the committee made the determination that the commission could make the findings that principles of good forest management will be best served by the proposed removals, and that a reasonable and practical development of the property on which the trees are located requires removal of the trees.
I have a question. I was there yesterday, and the weeping fig is already down to fence height. All the greenery is removed, and the floss silk tree looks like a telephone pole. I took a picture. And it was kind of shocking to see, because the floss silk has the only greenery, I mean, I know it's not the right time of year, but it's above where the ficus is. So I had some questions. I mean, the tree still has green on it, but it has been taken down to stumps that big. So.
Chair Clark and Commissioner Longstreet will have to provide an updated on-site inspection. The last time we were on the property, we did not see that. We've had dialogue with the applicant, and they should have known that they couldn't take any action on the trees in that capacity until after the commission meeting today. So we'll follow up with the applicant promptly.
It was a bit surprising, I thought. I've never seen it in 25 years that we've gone out to look at a tree and had it be that materially changed from the pictures that we get in our packet. So I don't have a big problem. I can see the need to remove those trees on that constrained site, but doing it ahead of time. And with what it looks like now, I don't know how the floss silk is going to leaf out, but it doesn't have any branches below about 20 feet.
Chair Clark and Commissioner Longstreet, as somewhat evidenced in the photo to the right of the floss silk tree, the weeping fig canopy was so dense that it essentially suppressed all growth laterally and kind of forced lots of like vertical growth from the tree. So I think there was probably not a lot of like natural branching habit just as a result of the competition between the two plants as they were growing.
Will that happen now that it's removed? Will that old growth get some?
It's unlikely that you would see lots of new bud and branch development along the stem, but certainly it's the competition between the two has been reduced, so you should expect to see an improvement in its just overall performance and vigor.
Okay, thank you.
Is it appropriate to make a recommendation at this point with the ficus essentially already terminated?
Chair Clark and Commissioners, I think in this situation, without having seen the tree, it still would be appropriate. It's a tree that, while again, none of this makes taking action on something prior to commission action acceptable, and we will look into it. That if there was a tree that was going to respond well to inappropriate or aggressive pruning, it's this tree. So it's certainly not a lost cause in terms of its long-term potential and its ability to recover. Certainly not appropriate, but it's still a functional tree, even though it may have been over-pruned.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, well, I would just like to say that I was out there with the street tree committee several times looking at these trees, and the chestnut tree did have pretty visible signs of decay. One of the street tree advisory committee members was able to get in there and pull off hunks of fungus rot. I think it was fungus. So as much as it's a beautiful specimen and not super common in our town, it was time for that to go.
I would make a motion that we concur with the Street Tree Advisory Committee's recommendation to remove the ficus and the horse chestnut, and that we asked staff to speak with the applicant about the removal prior to permission, and that this meets good forest management. Is that the one the principles of good forest management and the practical development on the property?
And then did you want to add deny removal of the floss?
Yes, and deny removal of the floss silk tree.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So moved.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, the last Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for review is located at 3069 Calle Mariposa. The applicant's requesting the removal of 2 trees from the front setback on the side of the property. One is a flowering ornamental pear and the other one is an orange tree. The applicant noted a general decline in the orange tree. It's exhibiting just classic signs of senescence, just age and decline in vigor. The applicant has referenced previous removals of other flowering pears on the property. They mentioned root-related issues with the previous removals, and actually it came to the commission several years ago requesting the removal of one. The committee reviewed the applications and reviewed both trees on site. During review, they noted no significant issues with the pear tree. There was, we looked around at the base of the tree and there was really no signs of decay, and overall the tree was in really good health. So the committee made a motion to approve the removal of the orange tree and deny the request to remove the flowering ornamental pear, with the condition that the applicant replace the orange tree with a fruit tree as they had requested on their application. During the review, the committee determined the commission could make the finding that principles of good forest management will be best served by the proposed removal.
Any questions for Mr. Slack? No. Okay. I would like to make a motion to agree with the Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation to approve removal of the orange tree and deny removal of the evergreen pear on the condition that the applicant plant a replacement fruit tree as proposed on the application.
I'll second.
Discussion? I know we're tired. I have one quick question. Do ginkgo bilobas do well in this town? Because they're beautiful, but you don't see very many of them.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, you can see highly varied performance in that particular species, but there exists some pretty spectacular ones in town in terms of, a ginkgo in Southern California.
Yeah.
Out in Hidden Valley, right by the very cool Hidden Valley Park.
Yeah, okay.
There's quite a
I'll go
few
look for it.
on Torino, I believe is the street. Yeah.
Cool, thank you. Okay. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? So moved. For a director's report, Ms. Zachary.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, that was a marathon tree session. Thank you. We had a lot, and appreciate all of your consideration. So now we get to talk about some of the things we're just doing that you don't have to take action on, although hopefully you'll come participate in some of them. We've been every month bringing forward a different adapted program event. It's a very active section in our recreation division in terms of the types of festivities that are put on. And on Friday, February 7th, we had the Valentine's Dance at the Creo Street Gym. And in addition to the participants, as you can see from the staff report, a tremendous turnout of volunteers. The Mission City Church and the students from the Westmont College, and then a local nonprofit, World of Dance. So it was a very busy place, and they helped really make it happen. Volunteers if you can imagine providing a dance to 75 to 100 people, plus the food, plus the music, plus everything, checking folks in, helping decorate, and so on. So it was a tremendous success. And of course, there's another one right around the corner in March, the Spring Fling Dance, which will be at the West Side Neighborhood Center. And anyone that's interested in helping or attending can contact Julie Thomas in our Recreation Division. And then moving on, believe it or not, we're getting ready for summer 2020. It feels like we were just talking about that. And if you recall, I think it was 3 years ago is when we went live with Perfect Mind. And everybody got to go online with their smartphones and figure out how to register. Well, we're launching registration on March 2nd, which is this Monday. And again, opportunity for people to register for summer programs online. We'll also have Facebook and media posts to advertise them both now and throughout the spring, and sometimes even into the summer. As you learned from the marketing presentation staff gave, as we look at our turnout, we'll push out notifications that we might have room in a summer camp program. And then we're also working on a mailer that'll go out, which gives a variety of ideas about things that kids can do during the summertime. So between all of those initiatives, we hope that we have a really great turnout. We have a number of new camps that are being offered as well, and so I want to sort of shout out to the recreation staff and then also folks that come to us and say, hey, I'd love to offer a program through Parks and Recreation. Can we make that happen? So we're excited about that. And then on to the Cabrillo Pavilion. As you recall, we closed it in January 2018. We're opening it again in April 2020. We don't have an exact date yet, but stay tuned because we're getting to the final stages of all the final details of finishing out the interior and all the little bits and pieces and inspections that need to occur before we are ready to open the building and have the public join us. But we are planning for a series of events starting in April, and certainly as summer gets underway, I'm sure there'll be more, both to have community open houses so people can just come and experience the building and visit and see what we have going. Also, as we did with the Carousel House, having industry-related events to show the building, both the upstairs and the downstairs, in terms of the facilities that we have available for events and for community gatherings. And then in recognition of the donors that helped make the project happen, we will have a donor reception, which will be an evening reception, and that date is still in flux, but it's something that I will certainly be sharing with you. Similar to getting ready to open is what are we going to do when it's open? So figuring out our staffing plan, which has been pretty set. Our aquatics programs will be housed out of the pavilion as they were before it closed, as well as our special events staff to support the beachfront facility rentals. And then it'll also be obviously a place for people to go register for any summer camp or program, and all of the summer camps and programs that operate at the beach. That will be a hub for that. When we do open, we'll also have the shower locker facility that'll be open for day use, or people be able to come in and get a punch card. And then we'll have a gym available. Both we're planning on some programmed classes, but then also some drop-in opportunities, so people will be able to drop in and use the gym. And then downstairs we also have a training room, which can be used for a variety of fitness purposes or meeting purposes and that kind of thing. So all of that work we're gearing up so that when we go live, people can come in and enjoy the facility. The restaurant, which is called La Serena at East Beach, is very much under construction and anticipate opening in May. So when we also open, we'll have more information about its tentative opening date and the restaurant menu and the operating hours. And remind you that it's a breakfast, lunch, and dinner facility, so there'll be an opportunity to enjoy dining at the beach after the sun goes down in a comfortable environment, either inside or outside of the building. So with that, hopefully when we come back in March, and certainly before, if I have any information, I'll share it with the Commission regarding events that we're planning. We're on the cusp of finalizing those, so not 100% ready to to launch. But we're very, very excited, as you can imagine, to get the building open and reopen it to the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Big shout out to all of the volunteers from Mission City Church and the professor and Westmont College students and World Dance who contributed volunteers for the Adapted Recreation Program Valentine's Day Dance. Wouldn't happen without them.
And also to our staff. I think Julie Thomas does a great job. She's very enthusiastic and plans good events, so that's great. And look forward to touring the Cabrillo Arts Center. It'll be very exciting to see it done.
It's been 2 years already. Weeks. That was fast. That was fast. Fairly on schedule.
But you didn't think it was fast.
I don't think it was fast for the staff that was working on it. I think it was a...
Chair Clark and Commissioners, we've been working on this project since 2010, so it's a 10-year endeavor.
Kudos. All right. And with that, I'll adjourn this meeting. Thank you.